class today. As mentioned, we have a guest speaker. And so we just finished studying, just so you know, we just finished studying a little bit. We didn't even finish really. We got halfway through, but our section on Nalani Eha.
Cool.
And that time where Henry Berger and the Royal Hawaiian Band, which is going to lead us quite perfectly, I think, into where you're going to take us. So this is my good friend Kilin Reece. He goes by Kai. So how's about a hand for him? And I'm going to let him take it over from here.
Mahalo. Thank you very much. I'm so stoked to be here. The last time I was in this class was like almost 20 years ago. I was doing a little bluegrass guitar workshop for Ron Liu. You guys all know, he's retired now.
He still teaches
early
college.
Cool. But I'll just give you a little background on myself. I've been a musician and luthier. You guys know what a luthier is? That's it. Someone who builds or repairs guitars, or actually stringed instruments of any kind, which is different than a Lutheran. A lot of people get confused. But I've been working here in Hawaii for almost 2 decades, building and fixing guitars, ukuleles, mandolins, banjos, for professional musicians, aunties, uncles, doctors, plumbers, everybody. And everybody at some point needs their stringed instruments fixed, because people sit on them or leave them in the car or drop them, as you guys know. But what's been really incredible working with this community is hearing the stories that people come to when they bring their instruments in. And so as I started to hear these stories from my customers, I started to go, man, this is incredible. These people would say things like, my great uncle used to tour around the world in 1900, going to London and playing at the World's Fairs. And I was just like, what? And then they would tell me that they were not playing guitar, they were playing violin or saxophone. And I was like, wow, you don't hear those instruments in Hawaiian music too often these days. So I started to ask them more questions, and slowly going through the archives at the Bishop Museum, at the Hawaii State Archives, you guys hear about all these places, this new concept of music history started to kind of become clear to me. And I started working with the Martin Guitar Company, who is the oldest stringed instrument manufacturer in the United States today. They go back to 1833. And so today I'm going to give you a little slideshow, talk about my work with the Martin Company to recreate this guitar, and what I've been really fortunate and blessed to learn about in my studies in Hawaiian music, and how Hawaiian music and musicians really changed the way the world thinks about music and the way the world plays music, and the very designs of these guitars. Whether you're Bob Marley or Paul McCartney, or who's your guys' favorite musicians these days?
Kamuela, Kimokeo.
A+. Well, I'm curious to hear from you guys too. And if you have questions along the way, you have comments, just shout them out or raise your hand. We can go through. But up here on the screen, there's 2 guitars. The one on the top here is a guitar that was made in 1934, specially for the Royal Hawaiian Band. And we'll get more into the story of that guitar. And right below it is this guitar. This is the Kealakai model Martin guitar. This was made for a Hawaiian man, a musician named Mekia. And have you guys heard of Mekia at all? Anything about him? Has Kamuela told you? Not yet? Not yet.
Yeah.
So this guitar was the very first jumbo extra large model guitar the Martin Guitar Company made. And they were so proud of working with this man Mekia that they named the guitar the Kealakai model. And I just got back from Orlando, Florida, where we were presenting this slideshow. And it was to a bunch of people from the continent who don't know anything about Hawaiian history. So some of these slides will probably be kind of silly for you guys. Like, you probably have already seen something like this, talking about where Polynesian peoples came from on their way to the Hawaiian Islands. And as we get into a little bit later history, this is probably what trade routes looked like in the 19th century. So anyone going east, north, south, west was stopping in Hawaii to get supplies, to refuel their ships. And everybody who came here brought with them their musical instruments. Mekia Kealakai was born in 1867. And at that time in Honolulu, do you guys know where Merchant Street is? Right down there between Bethel and Fort Street. There's the old post office where the Kimokeo Theater is. Mekia was born 2 doors down from that building. And Mekia's father was a sergeant major in the Mamalahoa Regiment of the King's Guard. And so Mekia, at a very young age, was running around these streets, this harborfront district, up into Nu'uanu Valley, up into the hills. And it was a pretty incredible place to be growing up as a young boy. There were boats coming from all over the world. His father was a journalist for the Hawaiian language newspapers. And so if you can imagine being a young boy, maybe cutting class one day, running around, meeting up with some sailors, hearing some music, going down to the Iolani Palace and hearing the Royal Hawaiian Band playing on the bandstand there. Across the street from the Iolani Palace was the Opera House. You guys know about this opera house that was here? The Opera House in Honolulu was debuting operas before New York or San Francisco oftentimes. It was coming straight from Europe to Honolulu. So Mekia had a reputation for being kind of a rascal. And so much so that at age 12, his father said, you're going to be going to the boys' reform school from now on, which was like you had to live there, you couldn't leave, big fence around it. You guys know where Kamakapili Church is now in Kapalama? Right across the street is Kaiulani Elementary. That's the original location of the boys' reform school. And that school actually predates Kamehameha schools. But Mekia was sent there, and they would pound poi all day long. They would work. They would get vocational training in like saddle making or carpentry. But the other thing that was happening there is Henry Berger was going there and teaching music to these kids. And what do you guys know about Henry Berger? Have you gotten to Henry Berger yet?
We just touched on him last class.
So Henry Berger was a military-style brass band leader, big, 40, 60-member brass bands. And Berger came to Hawaii straight from the Franco-Prussian War in Europe, where he would march onto the battlefield with his brass band, and after the fighting, they would double as the medics, and they would drag these wounded guys off the battlefield. So Berger showed up in Honolulu with a really kind of visceral guts kind of concept of music. It wasn't just entertainment, yeah? It wasn't just like high society kind of like fluffy stuff. This was, how do you change people's lives? And so he started going to the boys' reform school and teaching these young kids music theory, composition, harmony, stringed instruments, brass instruments, woodwind instruments. And in 1874, as you guys probably know, this fellow on the left, David Kalakaua, became the king of Hawaii. Now, Kalakaua and Liliuokalani were also really profound musicians. They had been studying since their early days the same things: theory, composition, harmony, multiple instruments. And so, the Nalani Eha part of the story, these guys, to kind of compete with each other, they formed what they call Glee Clubs. They're string-backed singing clubs. And so in the Kingdom of Hawaii at this time, there became this really sophisticated, high level of musicianship, string band style. And we'll kind of touch on that as we go forward. Also, what was happening around this time, and a little bit earlier, Hawaiians kind of went crazy for the guitar ahead of the curve, Like continental America was really infatuated with the mandolin, the banjo, but right away, for some reason, Hawaiians just fell in love with the guitar. So in hula troops, traditional hula troops like this, ipuheke oftentimes in these bands. It even kind of looks like an ipuheke, right? In the cross section, it looks very similar. So guitar started being used to accompany hula. A new style of hula called hula kui, or joined, became really popular under the patronage of the king. And so young Mekia, growing up in downtown Honolulu area, was taking all these elements and putting them together. You guys heard of Joseph Kekuku? A little bit? So Joseph Kikuku was also a good friend of Mekia's at this time. And Kikuku came up with a new style of playing guitar with a slide. Now they call it Hawaiian slide or Hawaiian steel guitar. But this was a new way to play the guitar in the 1880s. He was attending Kamehameha schools right up until the point he got kicked out of Kamehameha schools. So we have these two rascal kids, right? They're getting kicked out of school, running around the hills and streets of Honolulu. This is another instrument that was popular in Hawaii at the time. This is called an ukeke. And have you ever heard anybody say that in Hawaii there was no music until the missionaries showed up? Or there was no string instruments until Captain Cook showed up? You hear these things said, right? And they're just not true. This is an instrument, it's in the family of instruments called a mouth bow. And you hold this long piece of wood in your mouth and you strum it. And as you change the shape of your mouth, you get this kind of wow, 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 wow kind of effect. Have you ever heard of a Jew's harp, anybody? You ever seen that? Probably not. But this is a traditional native Hawaiian stringed instrument. And there's a man here now teaching people how to make these and kind of revitalizing this tradition of Hawaiian stringed instruments. This is Merchant Street in 1884. There's Kumakahua Theater, the post office right there. And if you look down, this building, now there's a park there. You know, there's a little grassy area with palm trees. This is the original Honolulu Hale, like downtown civic building. This building is the newspaper printing house of the Pacific Commercial Advertiser, and right next door is where Mekia was born and raised. So if we were looking this way towards Nu'uanu, we would see in 1884 the first building where Manuel Nunes, a Portuguese fellow, showed up here and started building the first ukuleles in the Kingdom of Hawaii. This neighborhood had lots of saloons, lots of dance clubs, and Mekia's first job was as a newspaper salesman. So he would be walking the streets. He would see the news before anybody else. Mekia, like most of his generations, spoke English, Hawaiian, and German as a result of their training with Mr. Berger. There's Berger with his very hipster beard ahead of the curve. And there's a picture of Mekia. Anybody have any questions at this point? Am I moving too fast? Too much information? Okay. This is a photograph on February 12th, 1883. This is the coronation parade for... No, sorry, this is 1886, actually. The 1883 is wrong. This is the Jubilee celebration for Kalakaua. And you can see in the front Henry Berger marching, playing the fife. Standing right behind him is Mekia playing the trombone. And then marching in white behind them are all the other Keoniula Boys Reform School gang. This is a photo on the steps of Iolani Palace, the Royal Hawaiian Band. Mekia's in the top left corner, looking kind of salty. I don't know why. He's in the back. So this is an interesting thing in the research. At the Hawaii State Archives, they have all of the dinner menus or lunch menus from Kalakaua's official, like the ambassador from France would come, or Russia, or England, and they would entertain them at the Iolani Palace, and they would print out these little menus where they would tell you what the food was going to be, and then on the flip side, they would tell you what the music selections were going to be. And so as we've been going back and doing research, we've realized that here's Mekia in the Royal Hawaiian Band playing at the Iolani Palace, playing big brass band arrangements of Bach and Verdi and Strauss and Mozart, all these composers who are like kind of the titans of Western classical music. And right around this time, Mekia started studying the flute. He just went absolutely nuts for the classical flute. And before long...
Does that say boiled brain? I can't read.
Broiled chicken,
Yes.
mashed potatoes.
No, broiled.
Where's?
Under fish.
It says fruits, then fish, then broiled.
Broiled. Beefsteak. Oh, brain. It does say brain. Yeah.
Sounds delicious.
Monkey brain.
Shrimp curry, chicken salad, eggs, sweet omelets, and ice cream. So, as we've been doing the research, these are Henry Berger's actual journals. That anybody who wants to go, let's have a field trip, call me up, I can take you down and show you, or you can just go yourself. All of this is public archives. So you can go there, you can photograph anything you want, you can use it to publish a book, you can put it on your website, you can do whatever you want. It's public archives. So in these journals, here we have February 5th, 1885, it says Miss Dominus Music. Anybody know who Miss Dominus was? Future Queen Liliuokalani. So here's Miss Dominus getting together with Mr. Berger, and then underneath it says Mit Mekia. So this is a teenage Mekia Kealakai getting together with the queen, the future queen, and Henry Berger to work on composition, maybe refine some arrangements of some songs. And I started coming across this over and over again. It says the new skating rink music. I was like, what could that mean? There's no ice skating rinks in the 1880s in Honolulu. But turns out it's a roller skating rink on Hotel Street. And so starting in the 1860s, the Hawaiian Kingdom went nuts for roller skating. And these roller skating rinks were popping up. And the Royal Hawaiian Band would go and play live music for people to skate in circles and get their exercise. Kind of trippy, huh? You don't think about that.
When was that? 1860?
That was 1880s, but I looked up the skating rink. It opened up in the 1860s. This is Kalakaua's actual Glee Club. This is his gang of guys. And you can see the instruments. The fellow on this side is holding a tambourine, and then next to him there's an ukulele, a guitar. I think the guy in the middle is holding a mandolin, a 5-string banjo, a fiddle, and then the fellow at the far end is holding in his hand rib bones from like a pig, and they're played as you ever hear bones played like that? You ever hear anyone play spoons? Yeah. So same thing. It's like a percussive kind of instrument. But this ensemble is the identical instrumentation to what African American minstrel type ensembles were playing at this time. And the addition that happened here in Hawaii is the addition of the guitar. But what's really incredible to me as a musician, when I look at this, that's basically a bluegrass band, right? Or like there's even an accordion in the front. This could probably have morphed in, they probably could have played what's like Cajun music from New Orleans. But this synthesis of string instruments and brass instruments from the Royal Hawaiian Band, it really, in many ways, predicted what was going to happen in popular American music. This is Kamehameha Summer Glee Club, 1897. This fellow in the middle is a man named Samuel K. Nainoa, and that's Joseph Kekuku's cousin. Turns out when Joseph Kekuku was inventing his Hawaiian-style slide guitar, he was stealing all his cousin's licks from the violin. And so in Hawaiian music for a good 100 years before the steel guitar was invented, the Hawaiian string ensembles were using violins and flutes. And I have a little clip I want to play for you guys. I meant to bring my boombox, but I didn't quite get it together. But this is a recording that I released with the Library of Congress last year. This is from 1904. And this is what a Hawaiian string band sounded like at this time.
You want to play it into the mic so that
Yeah.
the camera can catch it?
I'm going to play you one of my favorite songs, Moani Keala. So this is written by Kalakaua's younger brother, William Pitt Liliuohoku, in about 1873. It's a little scratchy.
Moani Keala by the Royal Hawaiian Troubadours, American record.
Hear the flutes in the background? Can you guys hear that? It's kind of hard to hear, but if you listen to the flutes in the background, they're playing the melody, but then they're sort of weaving in and around the melody, and they're starting to do something that today we just call improvisation, right? At this time, in these bands, they were also playing saxophones, and the saxophone was only invented in about 1860. So Hawaiians were so quick to pick up these things and get really good at them and then make them their own. You had also a lot of Filipino musicians coming from Manila who were trained in Granada in Spain, who were steeped in the Western classical tradition, ending up in the Kingdom of Hawaii. Actually, the leader of the Royal Hawaiian Band in 1895. I'm going to jump ahead a little bit. These are just some more string bands with all their different instruments. So in 1893, everybody here knows the history, the political history of what was happening. In Mekia's life, in 1893, he was, of course, close with the Queen. His first wife, Akiu, had been diagnosed with Hansen's disease, and so she was taken to Kalaupapa, and she escaped from Kalaupapa, came back to Honolulu, and Mekia took her to Nu'uanu Valley and hid her in a cave. They were hiding from the authorities who were trying to take her back. So if you can imagine, 1893, here's Mekia caring for his wife, hiding in a cave in Nu'uanu, still playing with the Royal Hawaiian Band, and all of a sudden the overthrow happens. He's got to make this really tough choice. The Dole government tells the Royal Hawaiian Band, if you want to keep your jobs and keep providing for your families, keep getting paid, you have to denounce the Queen and sign a loyalty oath to the provisional government. And so here's these gang of young guys in the Royal Hawaiian Band. They've grown up, mentored by Henry Berger in the Boys Reform School. They've been composing, being mentored by the King and Queen. 99% of them at that time are Native Hawaiians. They say, no way. And they quit, and they reform, and they call the band Kabana Lahui, or the Hawaii National Band. And they start performing in Honolulu at like the Royal Hawaiian Hotel across from the palace. They start getting crowds of thousands of people coming to hear them. Do you guys know the song Kalana Napua? Have you heard that song? So that song becomes the anthem of this band. And all of a sudden at the Royal Hawaiian Hotel, 5,000 people are showing up. And the Dole government gets so intimidated, they ban the Kabana Lahui from performing in Honolulu. They say, unless you get permission, you're not allowed to play on any government property, which means no parks, no wharfs and piers, no bandstands. And basically what this does is it blacklists these guys from making a living. So what do? They jump on a boat and they go to San Francisco and they start an international tour spreading the message of their kingdom and their queen. And this is them, this piece of sheet music right here. This is them on the steps of the Mint in San Francisco where they print money. And standing in front is a man, Jose Labornio, and he's one of those Filipino virtuoso saxophone players I was talking about. But this is a playbill from Honolulu from 1894, and you can see here the Hawaii National Band tonight at the Royal Hawaiian Hotel, music for all loyal people. And Mekia Kealakai is playing a piccolo solo of a song called Through the Air, and I want to play that song for you guys. So imagine, you guys probably haven't seen photos of the old Royal Hawaiian Hotel. It's right where, do you guys know where the Hawaii State Art Museum is now? Yeah. Right across from the State Capitol building. But imagine 5,000 people coming out to support Queen Liliuokalani. And Mekia chooses to play this song. Pretty cool, right? That's a hard piece to play. So Mekia, at this point, had developed an incredible ability on the flute. And so this band goes to San Francisco, then they go to Los Angeles, then they go to Ohio, then they go to Dallas, Texas. And in Dallas, Texas, they meet a man named John Philip Sousa. Have you guys ever heard of John Philip Sousa? John Philip Sousa was the baddest rock star brass band musician of the 19th century. He was like, who's the most popular musician now? Who's the most famous musician you guys know in the world?
Reese.
Bruno Mars?
Bruno Mars, exactly. So John Philip Sousa is like the Bruno Mars of the 19th century. And he's got a 60-member brass band. So Cabana Lahui shows up at the Dallas State Fair. And at first, it's John Philip Sousa and the Hawaii National Band. And within a few days, it's the Hawaii National Band and John Philip Sousa. And John Philip Sousa asks Mekia to join his band as lead soloist. He says, "You're the greatest flautist I've ever heard." And Mekia says, "No thanks, I'm playing Hawaiian music." He turns him down. And so, Bruno Mars, no thanks.
You don't like him?
Yeah. He's like, I don't care.
So we'll jump ahead a little bit. This is 1901. And this is, here we have Mekia with his flute on this side. Has anyone heard of David Nape? You guys ever heard of his name? Another really fantastic composer. Also came up through the Boys Reform School. This is Tony Zablan. Is anybody from the Waianae side? You know Zablan's beach out there? Named after him.
I think that his mentor.
And then all-star guys, some graduates of that Kamehameha Glee Club we saw the photo of earlier. But this is the 1901 Buffalo World's Fair in Buffalo, New York. And it was here that the Hawaiian band, these guys, were living for 10 months on the fairgrounds, playing to millions of people, playing this Hawaiian-style string band that, as you can see, involved cellos, violins, ukuleles, flutes, saxophones. And for 10 months, they're living at this fair side by side with the mariachi band. The best mariachi musicians from Mexico were there. And does anybody listen to any Mexican music? You guys know? I'm going to play you a little clip. This is
Close, yeah.
This is a song Mekia wrote at this fair called Waialai, and this is when Kamuela plays. Gabi Pahinui played this song. It's kind of a standard, yeah, in Hawaiian music. But see what this So this is, it's a waltz, but you hear that little ukulele sound? Dum-ba-da-bum-ba-da-bum-ba-da-bum-ba-da-bum. What does that remind you of? What does that sound like? You were going to say something.
Oh no, I wasn't.
Oh. It's very, very close to mariachi music at the time. If you listen to early mariachi recordings, very similar. Twin fiddle style, galloping little ukulele. Mexico had a very similar instrument to the ukulele. So anyways, these guys are living together, playing music together. After that 1901 Buffalo World's Fair, these guys start traveling nonstop. And this is a time, this is a photo at the World's Fair. There's John Philip Sousa, the Bruno Mars of the 19th century. Little string ensembles like this. This is a student of Mekia's, Louis Thompson. Turns out Louis Thompson is Duke Kahanamoku's uncle. And this is him in about 1907. These guys are touring constantly across the southern United States, up the East Coast, up into Canada, jumping on boats, going on to London, Spain, France. And everywhere they go, they're sharing this hybrid Hawaiian-style string band music. And And one key part of the story is this is before microphones. So this is before pickups and guitars. This is all acoustic music, yeah? And as these audiences start to go more and more crazy for Hawaiian music, the audiences start getting bigger and bigger and bigger. This is a tent show where these Hawaiian string bands were playing. Could you imagine being on that stage with no microphones and no pickups, no amplifiers, and playing to that many people? I mean, like, that's crazy. That's the view from the back of the crowd. There's the view from the front of the crowd. And I think they put all the oldest, deafest people in the front row. But so, these Hawaiians, they needed a louder, bigger sound. So in 1915, that's what a recording session looked like about this time. That recording you just heard, the scratchy old recording, that was made by a hand-cranked, spring-driven recording device with a needle scratching into wax everything that these guys could force down that cone.
Was it the cylinder?
Yeah. And so at that time, if you wanted to sell 100 records, you had to sing the song 100 times. So if that guy sounds a little tired, right, he's a little hoarse, it's good reason. In 1915, another World's Fair happened in San Francisco. And this is the Hawaiian Pavilion of the San Francisco World's Fair. Look at that crowd. People were going nuts. This is when many, many people heard the ukulele for the first time. They heard Hawaiian-style slide guitar for the first time. And in the year that this fair was open, the population of California, I think total was 3 million. 19 million people passed through these fairgrounds. And Hawaiian music was the sensation of the entire fair. Thomas Edison went nuts for Hawaiian music. Henry Ford went nuts for Hawaiian music. And so after this 1915 World's Fair in San Francisco, these Hawaiian string bands started getting so much work. I mean, they were making $3,000 a week at that time, which is huge money. They're touring nonstop, and they need bigger, louder instruments. So in 1915, the Martin Guitar Company gets in touch with Mekia, and they say, we need to design a more powerful guitar for you. And so they go on to design this guitar. This is the first ever reproduction of the original guitar they made for Mekia in 1915. So this is going to be part of the Bishop Museum exhibition. This is going to be part of the documentary film that I'm working on. And this guitar, at first, it was so huge. People were not quite sure what to do with it. But within a few years, I'll just fast forward. Everybody in the world was playing this guitar, and it's changed from being called the Kealakai model to the Dreadnought Martin guitar. Yeah.
So this model started in Hawaii.
It started as a result of this Hawaiian string band movement. It was originally named after the Hawaiian musician Mekia, and now around the world today it's known as the Dreadnought Martin guitar. And it's
their most famous, like their biggest selling.
Yeah, and not only famous people like this is Hank Williams, this is the Beatles, Elvis Presley, but people here in Hawaii like Gabby Pahinui, Sonny Chillingsworth, Raymond Kane probably loved the Martin Dreadnought at one point. But I want to back up just a little bit. This is, in 1920, Mekia's touring London, France, Paris. He's all over the world. He's kind of a big star, living in fancy hotels. And he gets a call from his childhood friend named Johnny Wilson. Johnny Wilson was his childhood running around Honolulu partner. Johnny Wilson is the Hanai son to Lili'uokalani. And Johnny Wilson in 1920 had become mayor of Honolulu. And he says to Mekia, I need you to come back to Hawaii. Hawaiian music has been changed. It's been a little bit lost. People don't know what real Hawaiian music sounds like anymore. And so in that time period, under what they call the provisional government time period, the Royal Hawaiian Band had changed its focus away from songs in olelo. It had changed its focus away from that string ensemble style. And so Mekia comes back in 1920, and he says, we're going to put the focus of the Royal Hawaiian Band back on Hawaiian music, back on Hawaiian language songs, and back on this string ensemble style of Nalani Eha. And so here it is, 1934. Have you guys heard of Lina Machado? So she got her start in Mekia's band in the 1920s.
Is that her?
That's her in the front. This is Lina Machado. And we can see there's the violins, the flute, the guitars, the ukulele, the upright bass. This is another fantastic singer, Lizzie Alohikea, who was Alfred Alohikea's one of his wives, yeah.
She wrote the song. Aloha, that's her.
So this guitar is going to be in the Bishop Museum exhibition. It's from 1934. That actual guitar. Yeah. And when we talk about what was the effect, if you ask yourself, what was the effect of these Hawaiian string bands taking this Hawaiian style slide guitar music all around the world? This is a man named Jimmy Rogers. And when you talk to people about country music, they always say Jimmy Rogers is the grandfather of country music in America. And this is Jimmy Rogers before he was a country star, playing Hawaiian slide guitar, dressed up like a Hawaiian troubadour with his lei and his sash, and playing ukulele. Another person that a lot of people who study American music history talk about.
The grandfather of, just wanted to reemphasize
Yeah.
that, guys. The grandfather of country music.
Got his start playing Hawaiian. He was imitating, trying to copy all these virtuoso Hawaiian musicians he was hearing. This is a letter that we found in the archives at the Martin Company from Mother Maybelle Carter. And you may have not heard of the Carter family, but they're the other big chapter in the birth of country music in America. Johnny Cash married into the Carter family. But this is a letter from Mother Maybelle Carter to the Martin Guitar Company saying, I need a new Hawaiian slide guitar to use in my concerts. It's all that people want to hear when I do these concerts. This is a Hawaiian College of Music in Elgin. Where's Elgin? Anyone know Elgin? It's like Minnesota or someplace.
From somewhere.
This is another Hawaiian style Joseph Kikuku steel guitar school. I think this is Chicago. Yeah.
Where are you getting all of these pictures from?
Lots of research, but when I started doing research, I was going to the Hawaii State Archives, the Bishop Museum, Hawaiian Historical Society, and I initially thought I got to go to Washington D.C. That's where most of the stuff's going to be, right? So I went all the way to Washington D.C., went to the Library of Congress, went to the National Archives. Nobody has what Hawaii has. I can tell you now, after a decade of hunting this stuff down, and all the archives here, whether it's the State Archives, Bishop Museum, everything they have pales in comparison to what your aunties, uncles, grandparents have in shoeboxes in your closets at home. This is what's become really clear to me is that this story, first of all, it belongs to this community, but the treasures and the information is really in the oldest people we have in our community here. So. The most progress I've made is talking to people like Nina Keli Iwahamana. Auntie Pia Lanimota just passed away, but she was Hanai daughter to Lina Machado. So, yeah, I mean, I can help you try and track if you're interested in research. You can't, it's not, and that's a big part of what the process has been for me is that these days we think everything's online. You don't need to leave the house, just get your computer. Sit down and stay at home, but you've got to go to these places and you've got to meet the people that are there because they're the ones who are the real treasures. And in Washington D.C., I did meet a librarian at the Library of Congress, and he's the one who said, we have these old recordings that nobody's really done much with. It's of a Hawaiian string band, and it was that Duke Kahanamoku's uncle. Turns out those are the earliest recorded string band recordings in the world. Hawaiian or any other kind of music. So those recordings that we reissued on a CD now are 25 years before the first country music recordings were made. It's incredible. But and the first time I heard those recordings as someone who plays bluegrass, I was like, that sounds like Appalachian bluegrass music. You know, the guitar's playing the rhythm, the flutes are playing, the fiddles are playing the melody, the way they're singing, the way they're improvising a little bit. So that's part of what's become really exciting about this research, is that it's changing the story about Hawaii and what Hawaiian music and musicians have done globally. Yeah. So what's exciting process is that I reached out to a lot of the musicians that I knew in this community and said, why don't we try and put this music back into action, you know, kind of reimagine this. So we started transcribing the flute, the violin, and the cello parts, and then got together with it's Uncle Aaron Mahi, Raiatea Helm, members of the Honolulu Symphony, the Asing family from Papakolea, Jeff Peterson, Jeff Ahoy, Ian O'Sullivan, got together all these musicians and started I think of it as reimagining this music, yeah, because it's not, you're not going to recreate it exactly. It's going to be today's version, but it's been really exciting. It's been really fun. People have really responded to it. But that's the end of my talk. Anybody have questions or comments? Did it make sense?
What are some of the other effects? I know we've discussed, you know, how the steel guitar impacted other types of music.
Right.
Rock and roll.
Rock and roll. So this Hawaiian style of slide playing got so popular that as a luthier, you know, someone who's studied building instruments, I feel like I can confidently say that that innovation has been the driving force between most of the innovations in guitar design. So the first electric guitar ever made was a Hawaiian lap steel guitar, made to be played in that style. And then about 20 years later after that, another Hawaiian steel guitarist from Maui, a man named Freddie Tavares, worked with Leo Fender of the Fender Guitar Company to invent the Stratocaster electric guitar. The Stratocaster went on to become Jimi Hendrix's guitar, you know,
Fender
Stevie
Strat.
Ray Vaughan. It's like the most iconic electric guitar. Freddie Tavares' brother, Ernie Tavares, invented one of the very first pedal steel guitars. You guys ever heard of a pedal steel? In country music, this is the most classic country sounding guitar. Played also in the Hawaiian slide style, but it has levers that your knees can control and foot pedals that your feet can control. So the fact that we can trace the most famous acoustic dreadnought Martin guitar, the first electric guitar, all back to the Hawaiian Kingdom period, to me, really causes us to think twice about what we think we know about Hawaiian music. And specifically, that culture and community in the Hawaiian Kingdom who, out of the Boys Reform School, were turning out virtuoso multi-instrumentalists, you know, who were traveling the world and changing the way people thought about music. It tells you that they were doing something really correct, I think.
And what kind of messages were they when they were performing? I know you mentioned to me when I was talking to you on the phone when I was booking you about these troubadour musicians, like sharing, like, you know, this idea of aloha and all this around the world or something like that. I remember you sharing.
I think what kind of at the core of Mekia's life is that concept that music is a powerful force that can improve the quality of your life. It can elevate your intellect, your spirit, your vocational capabilities. And that was kind of a new concept, that if you wanted to play music, then you could. But that's, you know, really a vision of that Hawaiian generation of Royal Hawaiian troubadours, that they inspired millions everywhere they went, that if you want to try, you can. And today, no matter where you go in the world, if people see an ukulele, they immediately they feel happy just looking at that instrument. You know, they feel like this is a chance. If I want to try, I can. And that's, I think, because that generation made it available to people. But yeah, so that's kind of one of their core visions, that music education, the musical arts are more than just entertainment. they're a powerful force that can change your life and the lives of people around you. I think
Yeah.
I would say that.
How did you come to this desire to learn more about Mekia? Because it seems like, you know, when we met in at the Market Factory in
Yeah.
Nazareth, Pennsylvania, you were still even teaching them a lot about like their own
Yeah.
history with the Kealakai model, right? So
yeah.
how did you kind of get this?
I started to piece together little bits and pieces of his story. And the more I learned about him, the more I just really honestly admired what he had done and the contribution he had made to music. I think personally, because I've been playing this guitar for most of my adult life, you know, the Dreadnought, as a bluegrass musician, that's the dream, is to own a Martin Dreadnought guitar. So I felt a real strong connection to the history of that guitar. I felt like in many ways it was my lineage to sort of explore and pay tribute to, you know. But I think also what's become really clear to me in sharing this information, sharing this story, is that it's information that in a lot of ways has been written out of the history books, you know. There's so many stories that get told about Hawaii and what actually happened here. And this story, I feel, pulls the carpet out from a lot of the misinformation that's been given. So when I share this story of this guitar with my guitar clients who are maybe in their 60s, 70s, you know, guys, local guys who have grown up admiring Gabi Pahinui and his music and his life and his guitar playing. And I tell them that that guitar that Gabi played, that you grew up wanting to play, actually is from Hawaii. It's very powerful, you know, it's very meaningful.
And I remember when we were so he and I met up in Pennsylvania. We actually did a little filming.
He was on his way to the Hershey's chocolate factory.
No, we actually didn't go.
Oh, you didn't go?
But we went to, but it's a believable story for sure. But we met at the Martin Guitar Factory. We met the owner of Martin, and we got to go. You took me back to the archives, and that picture of the blanks. You know,
the wood. Yeah.
You know, we got to see those. You know, and did they already readily know where those were, or did you have to ask them? Can you find them? Or
yeah, they had uncovered those in their archives, and they're taking care of them. You know, so these are the original. When you're going to build a guitar, you start with a piece of paper, you draw the shape you want, then you take that paper and you transfer it to a piece of wood or a piece of plastic, and then when you go to build your actual guitar, you use that to make your molds and your templates and your jigs. So in the Martin Company, they have these original templates that were from 1915. And a big part of the clue in the research was here it says the K model for Kealakai, and then underneath it says Major Kealakai, use for Ditson Dreadnought. And so this is, see this body contour is a little bit different than this one? And if you put them over each other, the only difference is in the waist right here. So when another company called the Ditson Company licensed the jumbo Kealakai model to be made under their own brand, they widened the waist. And why did they widen the waist? To match their ukulele designs, which had a little bit of a wider waist. So.
And Ditson Dreadnought is a person.
Ditson was a company. Ditson was like kind of a Sears or Amazon.
Okay.
You could buy any kind of instrument you wanted. They would ship it to your house. Yeah, so the Martin Company has been very inspired by this. I met with Chris Martin at the Kahala Hotel, and I showed him all the photographs and the research, and he got really excited to help tell this story. So that's why now we're working on a documentary film that Kamuela and Ka'ihi are going to be part of, right? we're working on the contract right now. But yeah, so that's kind of. I'm curious also, like what you guys think. What is the story? What occurs to you about it? As guitar players, or just as students of music? Is anything inspiring in it to you?
I think I haven't given Hawaiian music enough credit for the music that we have today. Not saying I don't have an appreciation for Hawaiian music anyway, but.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the things that I think we've been studying is sometimes we have this view that when people think of Hawaiian music, they think of the uneducated, like, oh, they only play by ear. You know, they don't read. But when you go back and you see, it wasn't the case at all. You know, that they were very skilled musicians back then, and if anything, they were more skilled technically back then than even we are now. You know, the musicians back then read music.
Yeah.
You know, they were able to play pieces by Beethoven and Mozart as well as Hawaiian music. And like they said, you know, there were operas being written. Lili'uo Kalani wrote pieces to an opera that was never finished, I don't think.
Yeah, actually Kamehameha III founded the Royal Theatre, which was, you know where the courthouse is now, on Alakea and Hotel Street? Right there was originally, in 1850s, the Royal Hawaiian Theatre, where he was actually staging operas and taking part with his siblings and singing, performing in the operas. But you know, and I think history is fascinating. I've always loved history. I didn't graduate from college, I never got a degree, but history to me is so important because when you start looking into it, it's a very different story than oftentimes we're told. And if you think about Mekia, at age maybe 30, touring across the country with Kabana Lahui, steeped in, as Kamuela is saying, the Western classical music of Bach and Verdi and Strauss and Mozart, as well as all the folk traditions of the harborside sailors and the saloons and the honky-tonks. And imagine taking a railroad train tour across the United States in 1895. This is before any community colleges were set up. Most of the population of the continental United States are immigrant, you know, really hard-scrabble working class people who are not very educated. And imagine what would have been going through his head as he's meeting all these people who are enjoying his music, who are wanting, he can tell, they're wanting to take part in music. And I think that he wanted them to have the same opportunity he had coming up through the boys' reform school, and he wanted to share the difference that music had made in his life with the world, really. I think that's the vision. And so when we see those steel guitar schools where thousands of, you know, haoles are learning Hawaiian-style steel guitar music, and for the first time they're learning that they can take part in a musical life, that goes on to evolve to the first electric guitar, the first, you know, Stratocaster, the first dreadnought. These to me are like the signposts now, you know? They're the things pointing at a bigger story. And
I have
yeah.
a question about if you, in your research, because a lot of them, the bands were Hawaiian, which were dark-skinned. When they traveled, did they encounter any
prejudice? And yeah, no, I think there was that. That's what I thought initially, you know. And there's these stories of Kamehameha the second and third, right? They were on tour, and some guy told Kamehameha the third or fifth, who was it, to get out of the barber's chair, and so he punched him in the face. But there's stories like that. But in the research, it's become really clear that people looked up to the Hawaiians so much for their music. They were like welcomed in these little towns across the United States. Oftentimes, there's a funny newspaper clipping. The Hawaiians show up with these string bands. The first Hawaiians are in our town. And it's like in Indiana or someplace. And then some of the Hawaiians in this band fall in love with these two sisters. And then they get married, and it's like the first Hawaiian wedding. And then a few years later, the first baby's born. It's like the first Hawaiian born in our town. It's interesting. And
the Jedis?
As Mekia's traveling too, he's stopping and visiting with people in London. And what's become clear to me is that music and musicians are are the ones breaking down every barrier that we know and we think about. You know, if there's some wall and division that people dream up, whether it's race, class, ethnicity, nationality, musicians are the one breaking that rule, you know, from the get-go. And one important part of this story too is that another man who was on this tour in 1901, William Coelho, came back to Honolulu in 1902, and he had spent all his time in Buffalo, New York, studying the way they were running their university. And we've translated some of his letters, and he was saying things like, what we need in Hawaii is a university. We need a university system so that our people can become doctors and lawyers and mechanics, everything they want to be. And so he comes back, becomes a legislator, and founds the University of Hawaii. So the University of Hawaii was founded by a Royal Hawaiian Troubadour string band musician. You see that story over and over and over again. When these guys are in Portland, Oregon in 1906, and Prince Kuhio's coming through on his way to Washington, D.C., he stops and he spends time with these musicians. What's going on? You know, what are you guys thinking about? What are you eating? What is this culture? You know, there's this constant like dialogue where these musicians are affecting politics, governance, education. So that's been interesting to me to see that.
Yeah.
Oftentimes and these days we think of musicians lower and lower on the totem pole. Yeah, it's like, you might as well just get an iPod, might as well just get a karaoke machine. It does the same thing. But what's become profound in this story to me is that we need to rethink not only Hawaiian history, Hawaiian music history, but what is the role that musicians play in our community and our culture.
I can't stand like recording. I mean, recording artists are amazing, but it's like the live performances with the live band and like the possibility for mistakes. That's where their true colors really do shine. And it kind of makes me a little bit angry because you can just take anything you want, go back to a studio, and just fix it. You can hit like a B flat when it's supposed to be a C,
right.
and then it just like perfect. You can hit
Pitch correct,
and
yeah.
it's just like cheating. So I really appreciate like
Yeah.
the crazy ways that they had to use to record themselves a long time ago.
It was work. I mean, yeah, and imagine
so cool.
taking a steamship or a sail ship from here to San Francisco, jumping on a steam train. You know, you get off a coal-powered steam train and you are covered in soot. And then you got to take a horse and buggy to the World's Fair and you got to stand on a little stage playing to thousands. I mean, it's hard work.
I
Yeah.
have to take a flight for 5 hours.
I know, right?
Like, really? No.
I've developed so much respect for this generation and what they did, really. You
And
know.
how innovative too, you know, to find the solution. And it seems like that's what these musicians were doing, is, you know, just creative and like,
Yeah.
you know, with that guitar, for example, the smaller guitars weren't pushing enough sound out. So they said, hey, Mr. Martin,
Yeah.
I've got an idea. Let's make a bigger one.
That's exactly, you know, what's funny, in the archives at the Martin Company, they have all the letters that anybody ever wrote to the company. So
Start writing weekly.
Samuel K. Nainoa, Joseph K. Kuku's cousin, I have a letter from him where he drew out a blueprint of how they could improve their guitars. He's like, try this measurement, try that measurement. Ernest Ka'ai said, why don't you guys try doing this with your bridges? So this relationship with Hawaii for...
Bring back the old pickups.
yeah, right? The prefix generation 1, that's what I want. But that's, you know, that's been clear in this too, is that these guys were innovators. And I think of them as architects, right? Because architects don't go out there and actually hammer out the studs and lay the concrete. They draw the blueprint. They're the ones with the vision. So I think of this generation as the acoustic architects of the electric age, yeah? Because it was their thinking, their demands on music that pushed this design and this evolution, yeah.
The Samuel K. Nainoa that you're talking about, is that the one that went to New York or whatever? And
Los Angeles, set up a school in Los Angeles for a long time, but he
is
traveled all...
Only you? Only you, only you. Was that
I don't know.
Nainoa?
It's possible. I wouldn't be surprised.
We're going to play that song on Thursday.
Mm.
Sam Nainoa. It's
Probably.
Sam
It's got to
Nainoa.
be.
Gotta
Yeah.
be.
He was similar to Mekia in that education became his big focus. So mail order steel guitar manuals, Hawaiian School of Music. Yeah.
Any other questions about this time period from you guys? ask a question. Like, to me, this is so fast. This time period is like so fascinating.
And it's not that far removed, really. This is like, I mean, everybody here is probably under 30, yeah?
I know my ancestors from that time.
Yeah,
I mean, I've never met them, but I know them.
yeah. It's probably your guys' great-grandparents' generation.
Not great, not even that far.
Probably just two.
My great-great-grandpa's
So my great grandpa, or my great grandpa, was a newspaper boy.
Oh, wow, yeah.
And when you said Mekia did that, I have a newspaper article where he was hit by a car
Oh, no.
in 1917, I think,
Wow.
on like Hotel Street or
Uh-huh,
something.
yeah.
A military guy rammed him. He didn't die, but it was in the newspaper. So I was like, I don't know if you knew Mekia, you know, like
Yeah,
newspaper boys. And he worked in the newspaper company to his adult life.
yeah.
It's my great-great-great. They were born in 1888.
Your three greats were 1888 born? Yes, sir.
The stuff about Henry Berger, something about, was it true he walked onto the battlefield and while they were like at war,
Yeah.
he would literally just play right in the middle of
So military-style brass bands, if you can imagine, in the middle of bullets flying, you're playing your brass band music, and that's another part of music. Music is so we have so much pride. So when you're on the battlefield and you hear like Aloha Oe or something, you'd be like, I'm gonna fight harder. I'm gonna keep going. Yeah, but yeah, crazy, huh?
Yeah, that's old too. That goes back. Bands, music happening during wars.
Yeah. Yeah, even if it's just drums, the snare drum, keeping people marching in time.
Any other questions? Okay, well, that was so fascinating.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for sharing all that research.
Yeah.
And the thing that's amazing to me is how I know the struggle of having a billion things that you've read and researched and want to say, but having to go, like.
It's hard. It's
This
really
is all
hard.
like-
Yeah.
Can talk about. That's why I was wondering if he has had questions, because through those questions, you might be able to pull out some of the things that he's not sharing that are in there that's just maybe too much for right now.
Yeah.